Hello everyone and welcome to yet another recreational programming session. How about that? So today we continue working on Musicalizer, which is a music visualizer that we started to work on several sessions ago. Right, so essentially you supply the music file through the command line argument, you start the application and it starts playing the music and visualizing the frequencies in this sort of like a classical equalizer fashion. Right, it's pretty boring right now, but we're gonna make it interesting in the future. Right, so what I want you to work on today, I want you to improve the UX of this application a little bit. Right, I think supplying the music file through command line argument is not particularly helpful. Something better would have been probably drag and drop, right? So I think I already mentioned that I want to be able to drag and drop the music to the window, right? So through Windows Explorer style file manager, right? So something like this, and it would automatically pick that file up and and play it. That would have been actually super useful. And to be fair, personally, when I'm working on my thumbnails for my YouTube videos, I work on them in Inkscape, right? I usually draw them in Inkscape. Sometimes I do post-processing in Krita, right? But primarily in Inkscape. I find it useful to actually have a file manager open with all of my assets and just drag and drop them into Inkscape and just like compose a thumbnail out of that. So for this specific sort of goal, I think drag and drop is more superior than like clicking file export and just finding the file there. And yeah, so this is primary reason why, even though I have this very simplistic setup with i3 and on the console and Emacs, I still do have this Windows Explorer style file manager. I still find it very useful. And what's cool is that the Raylib, the library that we use for graphical stuff in this application, does support drag and drop. It's actually pretty cool. Like, I didn't know whether it supports it or not. I was actually prepared to, implement it myself on a level of X11 or something like that. But apparently it does work with drag and drop. So we can just like use that and have it in our application. So let's actually Google up how you do that. So there were some examples. I think there were some like straight up examples in the source code. So maybe we can find something there. Drop, I don't quite remember. So let's actually find a file with the name that contains drop and see if we can find anything. There we go. So core drop files. So let's actually open this entire file and let's go to the entry point. And how do you do that? So here's the main game loop, and there's a function that checks whether a file was dropped. So yeah. Essentially, the main game loop can be notified whether a new file just dropped. So, right. And if a new file just dropped, you can get the list of dropped files. You can iterate through the list of drop files, do something with them, and apparently you have to unload the drop files. I suppose this particular function allocates some memory, but that is fine. And that's it. That's the whole API. So is file dropped? Just load dropped files and just unload dropped files. So that sounds pretty cool. So that means you can actually drop several files, and I'm not sure how we're going to handle several files. I think we're going to handle only one first file. So let's actually go ahead and try to implement it. I wonder if we can implement that within like a single session without restarting the application, because in the previous streams we implemented the hot reloading, right? So which allows you to change the code of the application without restarting it. So let me actually demonstrate you, because it's a very cool feature. I'm super proud of that feature. Oh my god. So I'm gonna do OGG. There we go. So here is the application. You can do different things in that. So let's go to did I actually run it correctly? I think I run it, yeah, I run it in compilation modes. I have to do that in a different mode, otherwise I won't be able to hot reload anything. So let's actually do something like this. There we go, the application has started. So let's go to the source code where we do the rendering, and at any point I can like write in the C code, no configuration files or anything like that, the C code. I modify the color of the bars, and I am gonna recompile the entire thing. right? And then I'm gonna reload, and as you can see, it is red now. Isn't that poggers, my friend? I think it is freaking poggers. And then at any point I can even change the visualization from rectangles to circles, and all of that within a single session of the application. And I wonder if I can add support for the, you know, for the file drops, for the drag and drop. Right, without restarting the application. That would have been poggers in my opinion. So let's go ahead and do that. So the application is running, the application is working, the application is working. So let me do this kind of thing. And let's go. So essentially you can think about plug update as the single iteration of event loop. So that means somewhere here, after we handled the keys, we need to check whether a particular file was dropped. Is file dropped? There we go. And I don't really know what exactly we're gonna do in here. So maybe are you even obligated to call load drop files after the file was dropped? So the question is the file dropped will still be true until you load the drop files and then unload them? So does it retain between the frames or something like that? Because one of the things I want to try to do, I just want to try to print whatever the files were dropped. We can actually do that by calling load drop files. Right, so here it is. It would have been kind of interesting to take a look at the definition of file path list. So let me actually see. So it's going to be ready. So okay, so this looks like a classical dynamic array, right? So the one that I usually like define for myself. It has the elements, it has the count, how many entries there is, and the capacity, how many entries we already allocated, right? So it's a classical dynamic array. I appreciate that. All right, so we can go ahead and just iterate through all of these things. I didn't want to clone the line. So count ++ I, and what we can do here, we can just print something like this. We can even say new files just dropped, right? New files just dropped. And let's just like print those files. Let's indent with a couple of spaces. We're gonna put S in here and dropped files, paths I, and after that we have to unload the stereo config node, Emacs, like unload dropped files, please. And this is a dropped files, there we go. So can I now rebuild the entire thing? And there we go. So I want to take a look at the log of the application, right? Because this is where we're going to be able to see all of that. I'm going to start the... why do I have KEKW and Gbated in here? So let me maybe put this stuff in here. So now if I drag and drop Gbated, it says new files just dropped and the path to the Gbated. So we already have that. That's actually pretty cool. So what if I select like several of them, like 3 of them? So it says new files just dropped, and here are all of the files. So we can actually detect all of that. And by the way, all of that without restarting the application. This is not a dynamic language. This is not a toy scripting dynamic language like Python, Lua, or JavaScript. This is, you know, real programming language called C with a static typing, compiled, and everything. We can still hot reload this kind of stuff. Right, so that's actually pretty cool. Anyways. So, and what we need to do in here when we load the file, when we drop the file, we need to, I suppose, substitute the currently playing music. Right, so we already have some like plug music in here, and let's just go ahead and like stop it, unload it, and load a new one. I think that actually would work, I think, fine. Excuse me. So let me put it like this. So we are supplied several files, but how can we handle several files? Right now, I don't see a way to handle several files because the application is sort of designed to work with a single file. So maybe the way we're going to handle that is basically we're going to check that there was like at least one file, right? There was at least one file, and we're only going to use the first file, right? So we're going to only load dropped files path 0, right? So this is going to be sort of like const char file path. There we go. So that's pretty cool. One of the things we need to do, we need to probably stop the music that is currently playing. So let me actually go ahead and just open the RayLeap header, right? So stop music stream. Okay, so that's what we want to do. Plug music, we stopped it. After that, I suppose we need to unload it. Right, we need to unload it because we don't really need it in the memory anymore, because we're about to replace it with something else. So, and after that, we need to try to load the new music. Load music. Where was the function? Load music stream. All right. So, and we're gonna supply the file path, and we're gonna assign it to plug music. Plug music, there we go. And that should be it. So it should kind of replicate whatever we have when we are initializing the plugin, I suppose, right? So because there's a plugin in it. And here, oh, okay, so this one is interesting. Right, after loading the music, we're printing its characteristics, its stats, so to speak. Like any music, like any character in RPG, it has the stats, right? A sample rate, sample size, amount of channels, and so on and so forth. Right. So, and depending on the stats, depending on the characteristic, you may want to handle the music differently. So right now we hard coded that we can only work with the music with 2 channels. Right, and the reason is because in a callback that handles the incoming samples, we assume 2 channels. We literally assume 2 channels. So when the library gives us the sound in a form of a sequence of floats, right? So so there is a sequence of floats, and each float is 4 bytes, right? So, and the buffer data points at the beginning of this sort of array, and in that array we have this continuous sequence of 32-bit floats, and that's what they are. So 2 channels means that the first float represents the sample from the left channel, the second one represents the sample from the right channel, and then left, right, left, right, and so on and so forth, right? So, and this is why we have this sort of like a structure called frame, which consists of 2 floats, right? And essentially having this structure makes it super easy to just cast this pointer to these frames and skip and like think about these things as pairs of left and right, and just what we do here, we just pick the left one. Since both of the channels are equal to each other in our specific case with the music that we're usually testing this thing with, it doesn't really matter, right? We can just pick the left one. So, but the thing is, we need to be able to work with music with like arbitrary amount of channels, right? And maybe this is something that we need to handle, right? So maybe this is something we need to handle. Maybe essentially, we want to get rid of the frames, right? And maybe we want to think about this entire stuff as, you know, pointer to a fixed array, right? So pointer to a fixed array. Essentially, we can think of it as a pointer that contains continuous array of pairs of floats, right? Pairs of floats. It's kind of difficult to see with square brackets because I already use square brackets. Let me actually use like something like this. Right. And essentially, depending on the amount of channels, the size of sort of these sequences of arrays is going to be different. In case of the 2 channels, we're going to have 2 of these things. In case of the single channel, we're going to have only 1 thing in here, and basically that's the idea. So we can essentially say, all right, so fs is going to be a pointer to an array, of 2. But that shit is not correct. Right, so what we want to define in here is a pointer to an array of size 2. But if you define it like that, you get array of size 2 of pointers. You get this thing inside out. it's not a pointer to an array of 2. It's an array of 2 of pointers to floats. So yeah, this is like a classical freaking C. For this kind of situations in C, by the way, there's a website, there's a very cool website called CDecal. Right, if you never heard about this website, put it into your bookmarks. Really, it's like a lifesaver. So yeah, it literally says C gibberish to English. Right, it's actually very good. So yeah, for example, like what do we have here? What kind of bullshit is this? Right. So, and it will explain you in plain English. Declare X as an array of 3 of pointer to function, returning pointer to array 5 of character. Right. So that's what it is. Right. So we can take our specific example, right? We can take our specific example and see what it is. Declare fs as array 2 of pointer to float. No, we don't have a pointer to float. We want to have a pointer to an array of 2. That's what we want to have. Luckily, you can actually take this English description and feed it back into this thing, and it will give you the C gibberish. So we can actually use this kind of translator to construct what we want. We want to declare fs as pointer, actually, not as an array, but as a pointer to array 2 of float. Declare fs as pointer, there we go. And essentially to achieve that, you have to put parentheses around star fs. So yeah. Does that make sense? I don't freaking know. It doesn't make any sense to me because probably I'm stupid. But that's exactly what we need to have in here, right? And it's very dangerous, right? And because of the sort of like C being slightly weakly typed, right? It is statically typed, yes, but it's weakly typed, right? So there's two sort of like axes of typeness, right? So like a static and dynamic, and also weak and strong. Static and dynamic typing is about when the type is checked. Is it checked at compile time or is it checked at runtime? Strong and weak is actually about, you know, how strongly the language adheres to specific types. For example, when you say a literal 5, what type is this? A strongly typed language would say, well, that is an integer and you're not allowed to assign it to float. Like a very strongly typed language would say you can't do that because this is obviously, you know, an integer literal. A slightly weakly typed language would actually allow you to just do some conversions and stuff like that. So yeah, C is a statically typed language, but it's kind of weak in the sense that it just kind of allows you to convert things around and stuff like it. It's kind of weak, but it's still statically typed. Right, so there's a good example of so C is an example of a statically typed language, but kind of weak. And there is an example of dynamically typed language, but strong. A dynamically typed strong language, I think, would be something like Python or Julia, right? So they are dynamic languages, but at the same time, they're like very strong in their typing. Though I'm not really sure 100% about Julia. Like I never really programmed seriously in Julia, so if it's not really that strong, please let me know. But I would expect it to be pretty strong. So yeah, and because C is kind of like weakly typed, screwing up these syntax might be actually kind of dangerous, right? So yeah, what a nice language we're stuck with. What a nice language. So an example of strongly and statically typed language will be something like Rust, probably, right? So anyway, maybe one of the things we can do in here is give the link to this thing, right? Because it allows you to have a permalink. We can actually just copy paste this thing, and as you can see, it just adds like a query in here, and we can always just like copy paste this stuff in here. So just in case somebody doesn't want to like parse and decipher this C gibberish, right? So we're gonna provide this link in here, right? And if you wanna like use the site for yourself, obviously I'm gonna put that in the description for everyone. It's a very beautiful website, right? So I'm gonna just copy paste this entire description. So very good. Like I remember that. There was some like mnemonic rule on how to read C gibberish. You're supposed to kind of like parse this gibberish in a spiral that starts from X and goes outwards, something like that. And this is how you're supposed to parse this entire thing. But I never understood this semantic and I never could use it. So yeah, I can't parse it, right? I prefer to keep my types very simple and to not create these kind of situations. I like to create sort of like type aliases or structures. So that's the reason why I had a frame with two floats, so to avoid dealing with this kind of stuff, right? Hopefully that makes sense. So, and after that, right, so we can actually not use left, we can always use like 0. So that way we don't really have this frame, right? And we are not really hard-coding the amount of channels. We do hard-code the amount of channels, but now it is super easy to change it, right? So you want to work with a single channel, it's now 1. You want to work with 3 channels, is 3 channels even a thing? I don't really know, I'm not a sound person. You put 3 in here and it's supposed to work. It would be kind of nice if we knew the amount of channels at this specific place. But the only place where we can know the amount of channels is the plugin state, and we don't have an access to the plugin state, right? Because we're passing plugin state as an argument of the functions of the plugin, but in the plugin itself, right? In the plugin itself, we have a music, right? So we have this music, which is pretty cool. And then if I go to ray.lib, so where is the music? So here we have the like statistics and stuff like that. I don't think we have anything useful in here. I think the stuff that we're looking for is in audio stream. Right, in audio stream we have the amount of channels. If we had an access to the plug, I could have done something like this: plug music stream channels, and then regardless of the amount of channels it will just like parse everything correctly every time, right? So but I mean it would still use one of the channels, like the first channels. We kind of hard-code that, but one of the things we can do, we can maybe take an average of them or the maximum of them, which is actually not a bad idea, right? So we need to think about that. But we don't have an access to this plugin. We don't have an access to the plugin. So one of the ideas that I had, right, so to sort of like enable the access to the plugin is to actually keep pointer to the plug in a global variable, right? So, and I think I failed the challenge. I want you to implement drag and drop without restarting the whole application. Right, but I can't do that because I need to change like the plugin system to have an access to the amount of channels. Did I really fail the challenge? You know, I think I can still finish the challenge, right? So I can implement the sort of like limited version, right? So I can implement the limited version. So essentially, we're gonna still keep it hard-coded, and we're gonna be just super careful with what kind of files we, you know, copy, drag and drop in there. So here we loaded the music. After loading the music, so what I'm gonna do, I'm gonna print the statistics, right? I'm gonna be printing the statistics. So that's pretty cool. So let me actually split this entire thing. So we're looking for the amount of channels too. I'm not going to do any of these assertions. By the way, checking for the size of the sample doesn't really matter because the callback, the library raylib normalizes all the samples to floats anyway, so we don't really even have to worry about that. That's actually super cool. I really like that. So the next thing we do, we set the volume to half because I don't want it to be super loud. Then we start playing the music, and we also attach the processor. I wonder if we'll have to detach the processor, or unloading the music also detaches the processor. I would presume it detaches all of the processors when you unload this thing. Right. So I think that's totally fine. But I mean, it doesn't really matter because you just don't play unloaded music, so that means the processors are never called, so it doesn't really matter, in my opinion. Right. So okay, so we set the volume to that, we start playing, and we attach the processor, and that should just start working. All right. So let me see. So let me recompile this entire thing. So this is the plug. So let's hardcode that to 2 for now. All right. So seems to be working and everything. Now I need to be super careful. I need to go to the music folder and look at what I have in here. So what do we have in here? So right now we're playing the Tower of Dreams, and now I think I want to try to change it to Burden of Truth. But I need to know how many channels does it have. So it doesn't really tell me. So can I use something like ffprop? Because I don't really remember how many channels do we have. Is it stereo or it is mono? Okay, so we're gonna be actually drag and drop in the Burden of Truth. Right, it is mono, so that means the amount of channels has to be 1. So we have to be super careful. Right, we're gonna still finish this challenge, but we're gonna have it hard-coded like that, right? So let me now refresh this entire thing. And I'm going to start the file manager from here. So let's make the music a little bit louder, and I'm going to put this thing here. It just restarted the music, I think. Is it? Well, okay, it actually worked. I couldn't distinguish these two songs, actually. I'm really sorry, Null, if you're watching. I'm not sure if he's watching. He's not really into this like heavy math stuff, right? But if you're for some reason watching this nerdy shit, I apologize, I couldn't distinguish them, but I think it is working, right? I think it is working. So this is one song. So we are switching between different songs. Surprisingly, the Tower of Dreams still works, even though it is not mono. Wait a second, it is definitely not mono. So if I try to do ffprop, it's supposed to be stereo. So that means whatever we see in here is incorrect. To be fair, regardless of the amount of channels, whatever we see here is incorrect. For example, we have like a flickering high frequency. Right, and it's a known problem. I'm aware of this problem, but we're gonna fix that in the future. I know the solution. I read a little bit of stuff on how to handle with all of that, and yeah, we're gonna fix that in the future. Don't worry about that. But yeah, we implemented drag and drop within a single session of the application. Isn't that cool? That's the you can't. The music was too loud the entire time. I'm really sorry. I only noticed now. I wonder for how long it's been loud. But anyway, right. We implemented this thing within a single, like a runtime session of the application. And yeah, so that's the beauty of hot reloading. How about that? Isn't that poggers? I think it's pretty freaking poggers. Holy scheisse. But now, I must close this application. There's no other choice because we need to make changes to our plugin system so we don't have to hardcode the amount of channels. It is important, chat. There is no chat. I'm offline. I think I'm going crazy. But anyway, so so I've been streaming for so long. I just like I have a chat in my head, right? It's the voices in my head. So anyway. We must stop. But what's important is that we finished the challenge. We implemented a feature within a single session of the application running in a statically typed language. That is absolutely freaking poggers. Cheers for that. Anyways, so what I want to be able to do, I want to have an access to the state of the plugin. So what I'm thinking, so the way we work right now, so let me maybe draw everything. So let me start my paint. So let's wait a little bit. It's just like loading up. Can I just like ignore for now? We have the main application, right? So let's call it app. So this is the main application. And let's denote it with a square. So all of this sort of like, you know, code is denoted with a square. So square is the code and data is going to be circle, right? So, and we have a plugin, which is a separate DLL. So this is a plug, and there we go. And essentially, the app constantly calls to the plugin, right? It constantly calls to the plugin. One of the things app does before actually start like calling to the plugin in an event loop, right? Because it just calls the plug's method on each frame, and plug decides what to do on each individual frame. One of the things app does, it allocates the state for the plugin, right? It allocates the state for the plugin like this, right? So it's the app who's responsible for allocating the state for the plugin, and then it passes that state to the plugin on each individual frame. And this is why the methods in here, things like plug update, accept the pointer. So what I was thinking is that, what if it's not the application who's going to be responsible for allocating the state, it's the plug, right? So essentially we already have a method in in the plugin, which is called plug init. So here's the main application. And the main application, before starting the event loop, it initializes the plugin and then starts the loop, right? And on each iteration, it calls plug update, which renders the frame. And then the main application, if it sees that you pressed R, it notifies the plugin that I'm about to reload you. Then it reloads the plugin, and then it notifies the new reloaded plugin, you've been just reloaded, my friend, right? So this is like 4 methods in here, right? And essentially what we have in here, on each of these methods, we pass the state of the plugin, and it's the application who's responsible for allocating this state. So I had this idea that maybe we're gonna allocate the state on plug init. And we're not going to even give that state to the main application, right? So we're going to say, okay, plug init. The plugin just allocated its own state, and it stores this own state in its global variable. The main application doesn't know anything about it, right? And we're good to go. And because of that, we don't have to even pass this thing on plug update. So the problem starts to arise. I don't speak English, I'm sorry. I keep forgetting which verb I have to use in this specific context, but anyway. When you want to reload the plugin, right? Because one of the points of reloading the plugin is that I want to preserve this state. But if the plugin is now responsible for allocating the state and I unload the plugin, I lose the state. So that's a fucking bummer. So the way I think we can combat that is that the plugin will allocate its state on a heap in a dynamic memory through malloc and stuff like that. And since I suppose we're the main application and DLL, the plugin, use the same libc, they kind of share the heap. So whatever the plugin will allocate in a heap is, still available after unloading it, right? So this is my hope. I don't really know how exactly it internally works. If it works, good. If it doesn't, well, I don't fucking know. But anyway, so it's going to allocate its stuff on a heap. And when we're notifying the plugin, we're about to reload you, the plugin should return us this state. So we can even make it void star, so the main application doesn't even need to know what is the state. It's just a pointer on a heap somewhere, right? And it just tells you, like, I have my state somewhere there on a heap, I'm about to die, just keep that pointer and give that pointer to the next version of me. So that's how we're gonna be working with all of that. And we don't even need to know about that state or the structure of the state. In fact, in here, I can take the definition of this entire state and move it out of the header. So the main application doesn't know about that stuff, and it's gonna be only here. Right. So that's my idea that I want to implement. All right, that's my idea. So yeah, essentially we just notify the plugin, we're initializing you, allocate whatever you need, right, and then we're just calling it and it's just using its own state. When you were to reload, we give the plugin an opportunity to basically transition its state to the next plugin. Right, so we're about to reload you, right? So we're about to reload you. So give me your state, then we reload this thing, and then to the new plugin we say, okay, your state is this thing. That could work actually. So that's basically my idea. So let's go ahead and implement that. So let's actually modify the headers. In the headers, we also need to modify the signatures of the state. Oh, yeah. It's just like, yes, it's one of these situations yet again. Right, you won't believe how many people in the comments and outside of comments as well on different social networks and stuff like that told me, Zozin, you could have actually kept the signatures of this thing within the X macro. And those can get rid of the duplication between these two things. For those who doesn't know what I'm talking about, I'm talking about the previous episode where we implemented these X macros, right? So I'm gonna put the link to that episode in the description. So in the description we usually have the link to the playlist, but I'm gonna give the link to the episode about X macros, so you know what I'm talking about. Episode about X macros, right? So TBD, so it's gonna be in the description. So yeah, I kind of missed that. I think it's a pretty cool idea, right? So essentially, we don't have to define this thing in here, all right? So we're gonna supply the signatures like this, right? We're gonna supply the signatures like this. And what's cool is that we only have a complicated signature for plug init. For the rest of these things, we don't even accept any arguments. Not really, right? So for the pre-reload, we're going to accept nothing. All right, so we need to think what's going to be the signature of plug of this specific X macro, because it's an X macro. If you never heard about X macros, again, watch the previous episode, right? So watch the previous episode. It's actually a pretty cool feature of, not really feature, a trick that people use when programming in C and want to have a little bit of a code generation at compile time, right? So anyway, so what's going to be the signature of the plug? So the first thing we're probably going to accept, we're going to accept the name of the, plugin method. So the next thing we're going to accept, let's say, is the return type. And then we can make the macro variadic. So we're going to put like a triple dot in here. So, all right, plug init is not supposed to return anything. So we're going to put void in here. And one of the arguments we have in here is going to be a file path. Good enough. Cool. Pre-reload is probably going to return its current state, so we can pass that state to the next loaded plugin. So it's going to return void star. So, and the annoying thing about variadics in C is that they must accept one argument, but the cool thing is that no arguments in the signature is denoted with void, right? So we can put void in here, indicating that this thing does not accept any arguments. And post reload is not really returning anything, but it's accepting the state from the previous plugin, right? And plugin update doesn't return anything and doesn't accept anything. So that's essentially what we can have in here. Right, and after that, we can easily generate this list of type defs from this specific X macro thingy, right? So we can say, okay, let's define plug. In here, we're gonna accept the name of this thing, right? The name, the return type, and the arguments. So it's basically a triple dot. And we're gonna define it as type def return, I set name with the suffix _t. Yes, I know that according to POSIX, it is reserved, and that's why I use it. Fuck POSIX. I mean, like, not really. POSIX is a good thing, right? Any like standardization is a good thing. It's just like, what kind of suffix do you want me to come up with, right? I need some sort of a suffix, right? I'm gonna use _t until it causes any problems. Like it doesn't cause any problems right now, so let's just keep it. If it starts causing any problems, it is just like query replace like that. It's not a problem. Come on. Seriously. If at any point this becomes a problem, it's just like replace it to something else and it's solved instantaneously. Come on. There are more important things in the projects. So anyway, so we're generating this thing, and then we can take the arguments and VA args like this. So essentially, everything you put after the return can be expanded with this sort of like argument. So it's a built-in name that refers to all of these things in here, basically. So after that, we just use list plugs. We probably want to put a semicolon in here, and then we undefine this thing. So that way, if we want to add a new method to the plugin, we only have to do that in a single place in here. But I feel like we're not gonna really add too many things in the future anymore, because this is a pretty sufficient interface for the plugin, right? Because we keep doing the majority of the things in the plugin anyway, right? So the main application is not even aware of the state of the plugin, right? So the only thing you need to do, you need to initialize the plugin, notify the plugin that you're about to reload it, notify that reloading has finished, and just method for a single frame. Like, what else do you really need? So everything else can be just done in the plugin itself. But I don't really know, right? So I don't have enough information. Maybe something in the future will pop up, so I'm not gonna assume anything. So let's just keep this thing in here, and there we go. So let's go to the compilation errors. I'm pretty sure that caused quite a few compilation errors. So let's do build.st. Okay. Undefined plug. Yeah, I wanted to undefined the plug. And what else do we have in here? Okay, so that broke other places where we use the you know, the X macros. So the cool thing here is that in the rest of the places, we don't really need the signature of the function. We don't care about the return, we don't care about the arguments. And what we can do, we can just say, okay, these are variadics, which also include the return type. We can actually do things like that, right? So, and essentially these plugs for these specific places, they're gonna only use the name and throw away the signature. We don't care the signature. All right, so, and let's actually continue compiling. So this is the list of plugins, and in here we also need to put it like that. And yeah, there we go. Isn't that a poggers? Isn't that a poggers? But that doesn't really tell us anything, right? Because the main plugin still uses the functions, right, that accept plug.h. One of the things we need to do in here, we need to modify them so they don't accept plug.h anymore. So this one does not really accept, you know, this thing, but it's supposed to return this thing. So the cool thing is that I think we can return like a typed name in here, right? We can return a typed name in here because from the point of view of like computer, there is no difference between void star and plug star. Both of these things are pointers. The specific type is only needed for the compiler. So essentially we can just like return plug, and on the main application we can just say that it returns void, and I think it will cause any problems because both are pointers, both of them have the same size. So I don't think it's a problem. And in here we can also accept you know, pointer as well. In here we don't really need to do that. So maybe this one is going to be something like prev, something like prev. Maybe we're going to also specify something like void, right? Because according to the standard, I think you have to put void in here. Unless it's a latest C standard, I think the latest C standard kind of abandoned that. So yeah, all right, so let's go to the compilation errors, and we don't have a plug anymore in here. So what we're going to do, we're going to make plug a global variable, which by the way also allows us to make this thing part of the state. I think that's one of the things we can do in here, but I'm not going to do it right now, so I'm not really sure what kind of problems it will cause. Let's just keep it like this in here. So, and let's make it a pointer, because as already mentioned, we need to allocate this thing on a heap. We're not going to keep it in a static memory, right? We want to keep it on a heap because I hope the heap is shared between DLLs and the main application, right? And when I unload stuff from the DLL, whatever that DLL allocated in a heap is still available for the next DLL. I really hope that it works like that. If it doesn't, well, that sucks. I mean, because that's a useful behavior. Anyway, so let's go to plug init. And in here, what we want to do, we want to just do a malloc, right? So I'm going to allocate size of plug, right? So the size of this thing. And maybe it makes sense to assert that we managed to allocate that. If we couldn't allocate that, well, you just don't have any memory, just buy more RAM, lol, right? So that's the only reason why it will happen. And in that case, if you can't allocate any memory, if you don't have any memory, like you can't really do anything anyway, so let's just crash. So after that, maybe I'm going to do memsed plug size of plug, right? So, and then we're gonna just like do the rest of this thing. So yeah, I suppose that is basically it, right? So it's just like plug used to be an argument of the functions, but now it's a global variable, so all of the code still works. So the only difference here is that we have to return the plug, right? So we're about to reload this entire thing, we detach the callback, we return the plug, and we're good to go. So here we accept the previous thing, and essentially what we can do, we can say, okay, that previous thing from the previous DLL now is our current thing, and we keep like working with that. Looks good, looks Gucci, looks at Tamaguchi, and in a callback, instead of like doing one, we can say plug stream music stream channels, right? And now, regardless of how many channels the music has, right? Regardless of how many channels the music has, it's going to parse like everything correctly. Hopefully, we'll see. We'll see. The winner gets T, that's for sure. So there's a compile. It doesn't know anything about malloc, and this is because we need to include the leap. Isn't that poggers? I think that's pretty freaking poggers. All right. So I accidentally saved the compilation for some reason. Just a second, let me remove that. So let me see what we can do. And yeah, it's the other way around. I'm sorry. Right, so it's the other way around. I confused the logic a little bit. All right, so it says channels 2. And everything seems to be fine. And now I can do this thing, and the channel's 1, and everything seems to be working, hopefully. So yeah, there's a little bit of flickering at high frequencies, but we're gonna fix that. All right. So let me see. So I want to get rid of this assert in the init that checks that we have 2 channels, because we don't really care about that anymore, right? It doesn't matter. It doesn't really matter. Okay, that's pretty cool. So what else do I want to have? Right. So as it works right now, you still kind of obligated to supply the music file through the command line argument. So it is still kind of a problem, right? Essentially, if I just try to run the Mutualizer, it still says there's no input file. So, but since we can supply the file through drag and drop, I think it should not require you to provide the input file. Right. So maybe it should initially start without, like, in a state where it doesn't play any music, and then you drag and drop a file in there, and only then it starts to play something, right? I think it's a pretty good idea. I think it's a pretty good idea. By the way, I think I'm running out of water, so let me do a small break. I'm gonna refill everything, and we're gonna be back. All right, we're back. So let's go ahead and implement all of that. So I suppose we need a way to indicate that we are not really, we don't have any music loaded, right? So, and the question is, maybe the music itself has some sort of way of indicating that it's empty, it doesn't have anything. Maybe that is indicated by it being zero initialized or something. Let me actually see. So where is my arraylib.h? And there we go. So I don't think it has anything. So play music. Maybe there is some okay, is music stream playing? Maybe that is useful, but I mean, it could be loaded but not playing because we have a pause stuff. So there's a thing called is music ready. Is that something that we could use? Checks if music stream is ready, whatever that means. It sounds like it's asynchronous, right? So maybe it's loaded in a separate like thread, and we can be polling it in a different thread, checking whether it's loaded or not. But maybe I'm wrong. So let's take a look at the implementation of this entire thing. So I'm gonna go to software arraylib src, and let me find that specific function. Oh, okay. Yeah, that's actually pretty good. So it checks whether the music is correct music, right? It has the context data, right? So it has some frame counts, some sample rates, some size, and some channels. Otherwise, if it doesn't have any of these things, it's not the correct thing. So maybe we can use this as an indicator that music is loaded. In fact, it will have all of these things equal to 0 if the music is 0 initialized. So maybe that's a good sort of indicator, if you know what I mean. Maybe that's a good indicator. So that's pretty good. We can use that throughout the application. So what we need to do, we are loading the music on plug init. And since we're not going to be loading music at first, maybe it doesn't make any sense to actually accept the file path anymore in here. All right, and so plugin init, the only thing the plugin init does, it allocates the memory for the state of the plugin. So that's the only concern for this thing. That's really interesting. All right, so plug init, we're not accepting anything. And I'm essentially just allocating this thing and mem setting this thing. And I suppose, yeah, that is it. Do I need anything else? I didn't think so. Right, so that's essentially the whole thing. That's essentially the whole thing. And where do we use plug music? Right, so we use, I suppose it makes sense to detach and attach things only when the music is ready. So maybe what I'm gonna do in here is just is music ready, right? Is music ready, plug music. Only then we're detaching something. And then we're attaching something back only if it is ready. Right, it doesn't make any sense to do anything with the music unless it is loaded, unless it is ready. That's just common sense. So callback, we're using music in a callback, but it's not going to be called unless the music is playing, and if the music is playing, the music is going to be ready anyway. All right, we handled that, and in update, we are updating the music stream, so it probably makes sense to do that only when it is ready. Plug music. Right, so this is going to be something like this. Now, what else do we have? When we are, yeah, so there's a lot of things we do in here, and I wonder if we have to do all of them. Probably Yes, I feel like we do have to put all of that behind is music ready, just in case, unless maybe there's something special implemented in here. Is music playing? So is audio stream playing? Right, is audio buffer? So many layers of indirections. So it takes the buffer, and maybe it doesn't matter. But yeah, just in case, I want to put this behind is music ready, just in case, you know, just in case. So I don't want to access this thing unless it is ready. All right, so and here is an interesting stuff. So when we got some dropped file, the first thing we do, we stop and unload the music, right? We stop and unload the music. I suppose it's only needed if the music is actually ready, if it's like actually doing anything, right? So if it has any data, I mean, only then we're trying to do that. Then we're loading it again. And this is an interesting part, by the way. What if you try to load an image? What if you try to load an image? And then, like, it's probably not going to load, it's going to throw an error, but Raylib is not going to crash. This is one of the policies of Raylib that I noticed. If something fails, it doesn't really crash, it only logs the error in the log, right? So it keeps running anyway. So I suppose if it fails to load, we're going to try to set music volume and play the music, and all of those things are incorrect. And especially setting the callback for such incorrect music is kind of dangerous. I wonder if you fail to load music, the music is going to be not ready. Can we do a thing like this? Is it going to work? I'm not really sure. Let me take a look at the load music stream implementation and just confirm if it's going to be incorrect if it failed to load. All right, so what are we doing here? So there is a music loaded. So if something fails, it's kind of difficult to see. So there's so by default music loaded is false, and depending on different like file type, if it succeeds, it just sets the music loaded. So I suppose somewhere down below, music loaded variable is handled and something is done with it. Music load, where is it? Right, are we in the same? All right, so if music not loaded, it sets the context data to null, which automatically makes the music invalid. Right, it is the function, the right function. I'm looking at the right. Okay, so I'm looking at the right function. Cool. So if the music failed to load, it will set its context to null. So that means is music ready is going to be false. Right. So that means in this case, this is justified. Right. So when we're about to load a new music, we're checking, do we currently have any music loaded? If we do, we stop it and unload it. We load the new music. If we successfully loaded it, we just print the stats just in case, because it's useful information. We set the volume, attach the callback, and start playing. Maybe I should attach it before I start playing it, right? And then we unload the files and stuff like that. So that should work, I think. I think that's the reasonable thing to have. It would be kind of cool to also render the state of the application differently, depending on whether something is loaded, the music is loaded or not. For instance, if the music is currently not loaded, say something like draw a text, drag and drop music here. Right, so when you start the application, it just like starts up the window and with a sign drag and drop music here, and that's the only thing it has. Right, a very minimalistic interface, right? So what you have to do, you just have to drag and drop this thing, and only then it will start visualizing. And one of the things in the future I want to have is being able to render it into like a video, like an MP4 video that maybe you want to upload to YouTube or something like that. This is kind of my goal. My goal is to have this simple application where you just like drag and drop the music. You can preview the visualization and then say, okay, render it into a video file, and it just like generates you a video. So it should be pretty straightforward to implement, because like Raylib uses OpenGL. So in OpenGL we can just GL read pixels, so we can extract the frames of the animation that we're playing, and then we can feed them into FFmpeg, right? Something like that. Right? So it should be pretty straightforward. But anyway, so let's actually see how this entire thing compiles, right? And then we're gonna fantasize about the future of the application. All right. So yeah, we don't accept file path anymore, so we don't have to provide it. So which probably means that maybe we should get rid of this entire thing. I even have a to-do for that. Supply input files via drag and drop. This is exactly what we implemented. I forgot about that. Anyway, so I think we're not going to accept any command line arguments for now. Maybe in the future they will be back, but for now I don't think I need them. So also we don't need shift args. So that simplifies the whole application dramatically. So this is the whole main application, right? It has the main logic, and this is the hot reloaded logic, which is auto-generated anyway. So yeah, it's kind of cool. Let me see if it compiles. Okay, so it complains that I don't use arguments. Let's not supply them. I really like how it gets simpler and simpler and simpler as we move more and more responsibility to the plugin. I think that's a good thing. I do think so. I think it is a pretty poggers thing. So let me start the thing and just see Musia. How do I start this thing? Mutualizer. Doesn't really play anything. Okay, so let's put. All right, that's cool. And if I supply something that it cannot play, I suppose I can supply flag, right? Because Raylib is compiled in a mode where it doesn't support flag. It will just not do anything, I suppose. Right, it still has a little bit of a garbage left, you know, after FFT and stuff like that. But I suppose it's still working. Right. That's pretty cool. So we can do one of the things. We can just like not render anything when the music is not ready. So in here, in the plug, we have the whole sort of like a scene, the whole scene rendered all the time with FFT and stuff like that. What I'm thinking is maybe it only makes sense to render all of that stuff if the music is ready. Plug music. It's kind of difficult to see what I'm doing in here, right? So, but the whole thing in here is rendered only when the music in here is ready. Otherwise, it should not be rendered. So, yeah. Let's re-listen to that thing. And it doesn't render anything anymore. And then if we load the correct music, it does play it. Incorrect music doesn't really show anything. Right, and in that else branch, we can even try to maybe render something, right? Maybe the text. So let's go ahead and do that. Ray lib.h draw text. Where is the draw text? I didn't see the draw text. Draw texture. So draw the text. What kind of text do we want to draw in there? We can say drag and I think this is how we spell it. Drag and drop music here. Let's put the position at 0. The font size is going to be 69 and the tint is going to be white for now, and we'll see how it is going. There we go. So it prints drag and drop music here. So though in case of an error, I think we need to maybe say something else. But how do we know when that the error has happened? All right, because we know that the error happened only within a single frame. To essentially know that the error has happened on the next frame, we have to store it somewhere. Can we store that? We could store that in a state, but that requires modification of the schema of the state. So yeah, we can essentially have thing outside of the state, right? So an error, but that thing does not survive hot reloading. But maybe it doesn't really have to, right? So I don't know. So one of the things we can do in here, right? So if error if error, just render the text, but could not load file. So 69 is probably going to be too big, but we'll see how it goes. And essentially, all right, after trying to load and we failed, we're gonna say error true. And here we're gonna say error false. So is that a good thing? Maybe. Let me see. I'm gonna reframe. It's not a correct. So error initially false. If error, well, it is initially false. Why is it? So if I do it like that, it's sec false. Nice one. Very nice one. I have no idea why it is like that, but anyway. That was bizarre, not gonna lie. So is that because of the error? So let me rebuild one more time. And I'm gonna restart the entire thing. Now, if I supply the file path, yeah, why is it by default? Why the error by default true when I explicitly set it to false? Right, so I set it to false, and then if error... That is bizarre, isn't it? Right, how is that by default a true? Even though I explicitly said... Maybe something interferes with all of that. Maybe. But since we're, restarting everything anyway, so it probably makes sense to actually keep it in here. Right, so let me actually just do it like that. So plug, so there is no error, right? So music is ready, so error is false. And then plug. I hope I'm not doing something completely moronic like I usually do. And it's like actually something that I don't know. Right. Yeah, so something about storing this thing in a static memory of DLL didn't really work out the way I expected. Something about that. But anyway, so we're playing this thing and then could not load the file, but then I can do it again and it worked out. I don't really know. There's something sus. Maybe we want to store the entirety of the state in a dynamic memory. I think that's what we want to do. But anyway, right. And here's an interesting thing. Now, if I reload, it still stores it correctly. So I would like to actually have an opportunity to maybe reset sort of this state of this thing, but maybe not. Maybe I can just restart the application. I think it's a little bit easier to do. Right. One of the things I want to do, I want to center this thing, in a center, right? If that makes any sense. Center it in a center. So to do that, I need to measure the text. I remember there was a thing called measure text, where you supply the text that you want to measure, and it gives you the size of this entire thing. Let me see. So maybe we're going to have things like const char label, which is initially null, and then also caller, which is not initialized. Maybe both of these things are not going to be initialized. And depending on whether something is an error or not, we're going to just assign different things. In case of an error, the label is going to be this, and the color is going to be red. And in case of everything fine, the label is going to be this, and the color is going to be white. So we also probably want to keep track of the size, which is going to be 69, and there we go. So the thing we want to do, we want to measure, by the way, size could be height, right? Because we want to do measure text. We are accepting we are getting the width. right? So we have width and height, hopefully. So, and after that, we want to draw the text, right? We want to draw the text of label, and we supplying the X and Y, if I'm not mistaken. Draw text. So this is image, yeah, text, position X, position Y. So that's cool. So we're gonna center it. We take the width of the window, I think it's just W, and divide it by 2, and then we subtract half of the width. So in case of a height, we'll literally do the same, right? So because we're completely centering it, right? So this is what you need to do to center a div in C. Way easier than in CSS, isn't it? Right, so in the size is going to be just the height and then the color, right? So we're just reusing some of the code. All right, so let's look at that. Isn't that a pose? That looks actually kind of cool. I think Raylib font kind of suits this entire thing. So we're going to try to load something and then load something incorrect, could not load file. It would be kind of cool to say try again. Maybe that's fine, right? Maybe that's fine. It looks kind of nice. This is a pretty cool UI. We're gonna have support for flags in the future, right? It's just like something doesn't work in Raylib for now. We'll figure it out later. That's pretty cool. It would be also nice to have like a custom font, right, instead of like a Raylib font. I wonder if we can do that. We can do that as well, right? So what kind of font we can use? Maybe I'm gonna use Allegria, my favorite font that I use pretty much everywhere. So I'm gonna do Jailbreak. Fonts, yeah, let me literally just grab the folder fonts from Jailbreak game, and there you go, we got the fonts. Right. So I'm gonna go to here, and in the plugin, plug.c, so let's just maybe also keep track of the fonts. And this is one of the things we can do in the plugin init. We can also load up the resources. So yeah, the problem here is that it's kind of difficult to add more resources at the runtime because that requires modification of the scheme. But I have a couple of ideas on how to sort of migrate the data scheme without restarting this entire thing. Maybe we're gonna do like a separate stream on that. I think that's a good idea, right? So anyway, so here we're gonna do font, and if I'm not mistaken, you just use load font. Right, where is the... Yeah, there we go, load font. I think we want to use load font XC because it... Yeah, so the way Raylib works, I do remember that, is that it actually sort of pre-renders atlas of the glyphs. Excuse me, I'm freaking dying. It renders atlas of the glyphs, and if you don't supply the font size, it's going to be like a low resolution. So let's try to use this thing. We're going to supply the fonts, and is it going to autocomplete? It doesn't really autocomplete stuff for me. So let's grab the name and put it in here. So font size, we're gonna use font size 69, I suppose. Maybe we can even have something like font size. So font chars and glyphs is basically how many glyphs you want to pre-render into the atlas. As far as I know, if you put null in here and 0, it just like pre-renders the default amount of glyphs, or maybe all of them. I don't really know how exactly Raylib works. So and in here, when we draw the text, I presume, yeah, we have to use different functions because we're not using default font anymore. We have to measure text, and we have to do XC. Oh, this one is actually interesting. It returns a vector instead of int, so it gives you the width and height. All right, so, and this is because in case of the default font, the height is the size, right? But in TTF fonts, it might not be 100% true. So anyway, let's do size, which is going to be vector 2. And let's just quickly measure that. So we're going to use the plugin font, then label, font size is the font size. And I wonder if you can grab the font size from the font itself. So default character, so it has the base size, but I wonder if that's what we supplied as the font size in the parameters. So like when you load the font XC, so that's really interesting. I would like to check that super quick. So let me go here. Right, so how is this thing implemented? So where is the implementation? So font size, do you just assign font size to the base? Okay, so use load font from memory. So font size, what do you do with the font? Yeah, you literally just assign font size to the base size. Maybe we don't need to even have this sort of like a global variable or global macro, and we could just use plug font base size. Right, and the spacing is going to be just 0. So that's what we can do. Now, when we... So this is basically the size, and when we draw the text, yet again, we have to use draw text exe. Ooh, this one is a little bit more spicy, because it has more parameters and stuff like that. So plug font, so we render the label. The position, okay, so let me construct the position. So the position is essentially, we're gonna probably use, we don't really need to use literal, I can do the thing. W minus size x multiplied by 2, and this is h, y. Not really multiply by 2, but divide by 2, but I mean, it's just, division is multiplication, okay, whatever. Font size, plug font base size, spacing is 0, and tint, let's keep it white. So that should use Allegria font, which will look probably more interesting, hopefully. We'll see, the winner gets a T, that's for sure. Doesn't even compile, because we don't have a font size defined anywhere. Let's go ahead and define it. So let's make it 48, I think 69 is a good thing. So unused, oh yeah, this is because we're supposed to use the color. Why did I put white in here? What the fuck? And height is unused, so we don't really care about it anymore. There we go. So let's take a look at the beauty. That looks pretty good. I really like that, but maybe having it as a 69 was not a particularly bad idea, right? So because it's really, really small. So let me quickly rebuild that, and boom. Not bad at all. So, all right. All right. So, we've got a drag and drop. Wasn't it Pullers? I think it was pretty Pullers. Anyway, so that's everything I wanted to do today. Thanks everyone who's watching me right now. I really appreciate it. Have a good one, and I see you on the next recreational programming session. I love you. Mwah.